Kia ora. No mai ki te whare. Welcome to the House. Ka Lui Collins aho. In what was the last week of the penultimate sitting block of the year, the House was moved into urgency by Deputy Leader of the House, Louise Upston, for the consideration of 13 bills.
I move that urgency be accorded to the first reading and referral to Select Committee of the Education and Training System Reform Amendment Bill, the remaining stages of the Defence Workforce Amendment Bill and the Education and Training Early Childhood Education.
Urgency gives the government the ability to progress bills through the House more quickly by enabling longer hours of debating with no stand-down period between each of a bill's stages of consideration, meaning a bill can go from first to third reading all in the same day. The Leader of the House must give reasons as to why urgency is being accorded. These are sometimes technical, like making sure a bill becomes a law by a certain time, and sometimes political, like fulfilling coalition agreements. The government had a long list of bills at various stages going through the House this week, all at varying levels of contention too, and with different justifications for their urgency. Because nobody wants to be on summer holiday thinking, gee, I should have finished that work thing at the end of the year, governments tend to want to squeeze in as much as they can legislatively before the House breaks for Christmas.
Madam Speaker, we are going into urgency today to get through legislation before the end of the year. None of the bills progressing this week will skip their Select Committee process.
That Defence Workforce Bill Upson mentioned enables the Chief of the Defence Force to sign off on uniformed staff, filling in for striking civilians. Here's Scott Simpson on behalf of Judith Collins during the first reading.
This bill amends the Defence Act of 1990 and it improves when and how the Chief of Defence Force can backfill civilian roles if industrial action within the New Zealand Defence Forces puts at risk national security or the delivery of core defence outputs.
That bill received its second reading this week, and as is typical at second reading, many of the MPs spoke of what happened during the Select Committee stage, like the Greens' Te Anō Tuiono.
There are a number of themes that submitters brought to the Select Committee. One of them was around concerns about removing parliamentary oversight, and I do note that that was talked about by the previous two speakers. There are concerns that the bill will enable the military to encroach on civilian life.
What is also common during the second reading is the foreshadowing of amendments that parties intend to move during the following committee stage.
We've got a number of amendments that we'll look towards putting for the House's consideration during the Committee of the Whole to make sure that it isn't just a carte blanche approach to making sure that NZDF personnel can just backfill any old position.
Because that bill was considered under urgency at the conclusion of the second reading, this happened.
Defence Workforce Amendment Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage immediately. I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Defence Workforce Amendment Bill.
Here's Daniela Moate-Cox with more on that committee stage.
Kia ora, ko Daniela Moate-Cox aho. The committee stage is the second to last one of a bill's journey through the House and can be the longest as there's no set time limit. Its purpose is for MPs to go through the bill line by line and make sure it will do what it promises to do. The sound of this stage is different to the usual debates, with MPs referring to clauses and numbers in what is essentially a final proofread. As an example of just how detailed they go, the first part they debated was Clause 1, the title of the bill. Here's Labour MP Peeni Henare.
Speaking to Clause 1, Madam Chair, number of matters that were raised by my colleagues and certainly this side of the House with relation to actually what is the true intent behind this bill, looking towards whether or not this is simply just as it says on the tin or something far more sinister.
Peeni Henare says it should have a different name.
Mr. Chair, I suggest then perhaps that there could be a better title for this particular bill, something along the lines of Denigrating Workers' Rights Bill. Something like that, that is very clear, it's quite poignant, it makes out exactly what we believe on this side of the House it actually does to this bill, Mr. Chair. And if we look towards the title, it seems innocuous insofar as it says just a workforce amendment bill, but actually what's happening is far more reaching. It isn't just the workforce of the defence, the workforce in the Defence Force, it's actually the workforce across public sector. And that's where we believe that the name of this bill probably doesn't match actually the intent of the Minister or this government.
Green MP Te Anō Tuiono also says getting the title right is important.
So I did take the point from the Honourable Penny Henare. His suggestion was the denigrating workforce bill, a bit harsh, but it's something I think if he does put it down as an amendment, it's probably something that we could probably support as well. But I think it could be more accurate to describe impacting civilian personnel workforce bill. That might be, I don't know, a nicer way to put it instead. So, Mr. Chair, this opening debate on the clause 1 is an important debate because it actually sets the tone about actually what we're talking about.
Another feature of the committee stage is that the minister in charge sits in the middle of the chamber at the table and replies to the various speeches from MPs. Minister of Defence Judith Collins says the title is fine as is.
Look, there's nothing wrong with this title of the bill. It's accurate and it doesn't have all that emotional rubbish that I've just been listening to. I think it's very important to understand that the Defence Force is somewhat different from what it was in 1990 when the original Act was first brought through.
Minister Collins says there has been a drop in the number of uniformed staff and the Chief of the Defence Force has fewer people to deploy.
The title is exactly as it should be. It is clear, it's unambiguous, and it deals with the fact that the Chief of Defence Force has to be able to look to his whole workforce and to use them the best that he can for national security reasons.
It wouldn't be Parliament without a bit of politics, and while the purpose of the committee stage is to closely examine legislation, there is opportunity here for those against the bill to speak as many times as possible for as long as possible. To move things along, an MP from a government party will stand up and ask for the debate on their particular part of the bill to end, saying something like, "I move that debate on this question be now closed," which sparks a vote.
The question is that debate on this question now closed. All those in favour say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it.
The MPs also vote on any proposed changes to the bill. Those from the opposition are usually voted down.
The question is that Dr Lawrence Unan's tabled amendment to the title replacing workforce with use of armed forces be agreed to. All those in favour say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No. The noes have it.
And sometimes a suggested amendment doesn't make the grade.
Te Anau Tuiono's tabled amendment to the title replacing workforce with counter-strike is out of order as not being an objective description of the bill. The question is that clause 1 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No. The ayes have it.
The committee stage of that bill was crawled through on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, with the House eventually getting to the third reading shortly before lunchtime, but not before a seemingly endless finish when 20 different amendments had to be voted on. Nevertheless, the Defence Workforce Amendment Bill has now gone through all its legislative hoops and will likely be law by the end of next week. Another bill that got the urgency treatment this week was the Game Animal Council Herds of Special Interest Amendment Bill. This is Minister for Hunting and Fishing James Meagher's first piece of legislation in the House. It seeks to clarify that a herd of special interest designation can be made within national parks. But what is a herd of special interest? Here's James Meagher during the first reading.
Herds of special interest are simply herds of game animals on public conservation land that have been formally designated by the Minister to be managed for hunting purposes. The designation enables certain valued introduced species already present in a specific geographic area to be managed for qualities prized by hunters, such as the size and quality of individual animals.
Both Labour and the Green Party are against the bill. As I mentioned earlier, it's typical in the second reading for MPs to talk about what was said by submitters in the Select Committee stage. Labour's spokesperson on this, Rachel Brooking, did just that.
I was very pleased to hear from many submitters who are hunters, submitters who are conservationists, submitters who are hunters and conservationists, a whole range of people, and they all came from, I believe, Madam Speaker, a very good place, and all do truly want the best for our native parks, our national parks, and all the nature within them. So we don't need to be being directed to different places in the departmental report from the Minister, because we did hear the submissions about the negative regenerative growth.
In what may have been a product of urgency fatigue, Green Party MP Celia Wade-Brown missed her call to speak, and nobody else took the call, so the Speaker Maureen Pugh figured the House would move on to vote, meaning James Meagher's bill got 5 speeches at second reading instead of the usual 12.
Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand. Te kauma rima nā pōti whakahe, and I apologise for missing the call.
This has been a busy week for Nationals' James Meagher, between his first piece of legislation going through the House and also this.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues. It's very weird being down this end of the table, but I'll give it my best crack. This is my very first submission to a select committee.
Meagher was down the other end, as he put it, to give an oral submission on the review of standing orders. He focused on one of the most recurring themes in submissions on the review, the operation of select committees.
My view of the select committee process is that it's supposed to be about scrutinising the quality of the legislation, improving it as much as possible, pointing out unintended consequences, rather than be a platform for advocacy or your voice as to whether or not a policy is the right thing to do or not. There is always obviously a room for that, but I fear that we go too far down the pathway of treating it as a poll or a referendum and getting away from discerning what are some high quality submissions that are actually going to impact and change the legislation to improve it as much as possible. Because of course, as legislators, we are there to try and get the best quality legislation, regardless of whether or not we agree with the substance.
He also touched on committee stages, perhaps alluding to some of the slightly longer committee stages this week.
I guess the frustrations that the opposition have on Members' Day and that government members have on normal days with the dragging out of committee stages is if there was more focus on relevance and repetition, you might get better quality questions and better quality debates without having to put the presiding officer in a position of making calls over closing a debate quite early because someone's gone on for 2 or 3 minutes about some titles that are clearly frivolous. So I think you wouldn't need to change the committee the whole stage, but some more focus on relevance and repetition could sharpen up the questions and sharpen up the debate without diminishing the fact that if these are being held during urgency, there is more scope to be given. I think more latitude to the presiding officers would be good.
Later in that meeting, MPs heard from Victoria University's Dr. Dean Knight, who spoke mostly about the other major theme in submissions, urgency.
I think it's fair to say urgency and expedited lawmaking has become an addiction at the cost of good governance and checks and balances in what is a delicate constitutional ecosystem. A constitutional ecosystem, which is a political constitution, which has a lot of checks and balances exercised through the political process. If we don't give time for that political process to do its work, we don't get the checks and balances. So urgency expedition acts like a bonfire on those checks and balances, and that really worries me. And I think we can almost take that as a given. The community has been quite activated by this, and I don't want to get into pack drill of who's been using it for what and things like that. The question is, how do we break it? And so I've made the suggestions about first the suggestion of tweaking the threshold for urgency and using some different language of requiring reasons for urgency, which are, I think I suggest, detailed, sufficient and proportionate. And along with the Speaker's ability to rule on the adequacy, which I think applies to extraordinary urgency, but would operate slightly differently if we had a slightly more elevated and precise threshold for urgency, particularly one that talks about proportionality. So it's not just a given. There has got to be something very special to a reason for urgency.
Ultimately, it's up to members of the Standing Orders Committee to consider whether restrictions should be placed on the government's ability to use urgency. And with 13 bills going through urgency this week, they won't have to think back far to reflect on its impact. These decisions will require MPs to balance the political and practical benefits of swift lawmaking with the precedents they want to set for future governments. You can watch the proceedings from the House and in select committees this week on Parliament's website. I te whakarongo koe ki te whare. You've been listening to The House, a program made with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Mātua.